I'm delighted to address all of you in Ravenna. I'm also very happy to know that the Gardini Foundation, together with the Darsena Institute, are taking the time to present my fables. I must admit that for me, the fables has become kind of a life work. As an economist, as an entrepreneur, I never imagined that telling stories to children is going to be perhaps the most important thing that I have done and will do in my life. I have 6 children myself, and therefore it is quite obvious that I take great pride and I put great priority on being in a dialogue with children. But my main motivation is that our children are bombarded with so much bad news. Our children have to go through so many pieces of information that kind of announces the end of the world, and if it isn't the end of the world, it's a world that is in pain. It's about time we provide the children with an inspiration. Not just any inspiration. The inspiration we're providing is based on science. Perhaps not the traditional science, perhaps not the science that we know and the science we're gotten accustomed to. It may very well be science that surprises, engineering that we haven't heard of, and indeed breakthrough thoughts that, of course, make us imagine that we can change the world for the better. As I say at the beginning of every of my fables is that we have to ensure that children never stop dreaming. And therefore every story is just the beginning of a path of discoveries, of surprises, of things we could not even imagine. And what we have to do is to take the science as a basis, but use the science to become extremely creative, innovative, to take it to the level of fantasy. Yes, if we don't have fantasy, we will not develop a vision. If we have no vision, there will be no strategy. And if there's no strategy, we can't translate it into day-to-day concrete actions we all can undertake. I sometimes ask the question to professors in physics and biology, asking them, do they know how the apple got up in the tree? And it's funny that the first reaction they have is that they immediately start explaining the law of gravity, because that's what we have been trained to refer to when it's about an apple and a tree. How come we do not associate immediately the fact that an apple first must get up in the tree before it can come down? That means an apple must first defy the law of gravity before it can subject itself to the law of gravity. What a fascinating thought, because the large majority of the people have not even thought about it, and when they are asked to think about it, they have a great difficulty to even get started by identifying the 7 laws of physics that permit the apple to go against the law of gravity. But we all know that if we don't understand how we go up in the tree, what's the use of learning how the tree makes certain the apples can come down? And I think this is the dynamics that we need to get into. We need to bring our thinking into a full loop, and it's not about recycling, it's about basically understanding how life works. And this is why it's so important that the fables start looking at some hard realities. And one of the hard realities we cannot neglect is that we have been overfishing. When I was first requested to visit the island of El Hierro in Spain, I noted that indeed the fishing grounds had been overexploited, and we're calling that overfishing. But when I took a closer look and I followed the fishermen for more than a day in all their operations, I realized they were not overfishing. They were fishing the females with eggs. Now, you don't have to be a great expert to know that if you're catching in your nets females with eggs, that you're not at all securing a future reproduction capacity in the most natural way. Imagine that I have a cow and I need money, but my cow is pregnant and is expecting a calf. Is it possible that I am now going to slaughter my cow with the calf, that is totally impossible. If I were to do that, I am actually a barbarian. I will be accused of inhumane behavior. But while we think this is totally unacceptable with an animal with 4 legs and perhaps some skin, we think that this is totally normal talking about fishes. That is exactly how we have to start with the new thinking. How do we go beyond it? And of course, my inspiration for these solutions comes always, nearly always, from the signs delivered to me by nature. How do the dolphins fish? How do the whales fish? And when we have a close look at it, they of course are not using hooks or nets or spears. They are using a very simple technique that has been developed over the past 1,000,000 years or more. Whales and dolphins, they release bubbles. And those bubbles, they have the capacity to push schools of fish up to the surface. And when the fish is at the surface, they're very easy to be eaten, very easy to be caught. But there is a very interesting smartness, intelligence behind it, because the fish that are heavy, because they're full of eggs, their mama's expecting, or even nonna's expecting, when they are full of eggs, they're not caught in the bubbles, because the bubbles are only made to the size that the smaller fishes are pushed to the top. Isn't this amazing? Isn't it amazing that the dolphins fish without nets? And not only do they fish without nets, they secure that since the nets are not needed, only the smaller ones are pushed up. And of course, that means that the mama and the grandma fish can release their eggs, they can get fertilized, and we're securing that there is a productivity for the years to come. A sunfish can have, at the age of 25 years, more than 25 million eggs. 25 million eggs. A 10-year-old sunfish may have 5,000 to 10,000 eggs. And so this exponential growth of eggs is absolutely prohibitive in our mind, because it means that we can never ever allow a large, older sunfish to be caught. We should only be catching small fishes, only the small males. I mean, they're quite useless, let us say, in the process, but it's exactly there where we notice that the present policy making is completely at odds, because the European Union prescribes that you should not be catching the small fishes, you should be catching the big fishes. Why? In the island of El Hierro in Spain, they have taken on this challenge, secured that the fishes can be brooding, reserved 5 square kilometers for their exclusive use. And 25 years later, not going after the females with eggs, not going after the nonnas with eggs. After 25 years, their density of fishes is about 10 times bigger than the average density of fish. Fishing without nets is a fable. And it is not a fable. It's been done in nature for millennia. It's only us, human beings, who've only been fishing for 6,000 years. We need to be inspired how nature has resolved that and get an idea on what is the most productive way to move forward in this quest to provide healthy food for everyone. The same applies to trees. You know, we look at a tree and we see cellulose. We see cellulose, we're thinking about diapers, we're thinking about paper making, we're thinking about cellulose that, of course, with 400 million tons demand a year, we have to start fumbling around with the genes of the trees in order to produce sufficiently. But then the question is cellulose really best used as paper? Or could we imagine something else like bamboo? Bamboo is an extraordinary fast-growing grass. It's not a tree, it's a grass. And as a grass, you cut it, it grows again. You cut it, it grows again. You cut it, it grows again. It grows again 70 times over 70 years, and that gives it a force, a life force that outcompetes completely any other source of cellulose. So why would you cut down trees in forests, and why would you go through the genetics when you're able to have bamboo? And so the fable has been written under the title, Why Don't They Like Me? I mean, when you're so good and so productive, why don't people like you? And then even the bamboo that we have, we can use it for paper, we can use it for construction, we can use it for many things. But then we should push forward, push further, and ask ourselves, the cellulose, should we really have the cellulose for paper? Well, sometimes indeed you need an absorption for all hygiene products, but for so much of the papers that we require, it needs to be resistant to water. And it means cellulose is not at all the best solution, and we know that, and the industry knows it, because that's why they're putting a wax or a polymer on top of it. But why don't we then shift to stone paper? Now, stone paper is made from waste of the mines. We could imagine that the waste from marble that has been accumulated for more than 2,000 years could be reused with a very simple polymer and turned into a sheet of paper that resists water, that doesn't use any trees, that doesn't use water, that can be recycled forever if you're going for a real closed-loop process. When we talk about stone paper, and when children learn about stone paper, of course, they're very enthused because they don't understand why you really want to cut down trees and replant them when you actually can do it without a tree. It's the philosophy that we're applying to really come to high levels of efficiency by substituting something with nothing. You're substituting cellulose not with a fast-growing cellulose, you're substituting cellulose with a waste of a mine that has been accumulating, that is causing respiratory challenges. That is where we need to think with our children about. That is how we could push the logic to new levels. You know, there's so many surprises around, and when we start looking for food, well, we talked about the fishes, but we need to produce much more food, and we need to produce much healthier food. So here comes the surprise of the microalgae. Yes, some experts and some specialists, they know the chlorella and they know the spirulina, but I would like to ask the question, who has really been putting microalgae in a daily diet? And who has imagined how to grow them on an ongoing basis so that we have an abundance of nutrition, healthy nutrition for the children, so that the healthy food is going to be cheap instead of what we have today, healthy food being expensive? Who makes sense of the fact that what is good for you and nature is expensive, and that what is bad for you and bad for nature is cheap? We need to invert that, and therefore we need to see how can we grow the microalgae with an efficiency level that we have not seen before. That was done in Brazil. We took rice farms, and when you have a rice farm, of course you have water, and the little scum that is growing on the water are actually microalgae. If you use these microalgae and you propagate them a little bit better, put them in the right sun, and put them in the right nutrition and the right temperature of water, then you'll grow microalgae at an exponential speed, and you'll be able to double the biomass every day. I mean, can we stop and think about it? It means 1 kilo becomes 2 kilos, becomes 4 kilos, becomes 8 kilos, becomes 16 kilos. I mean, this is something that we have always thought is not possible, and of course, it is not possible unless you manage this correctly. But how nice it is for children to see it before their own eyes, that the problems we think there are in the world have multiple solutions we can tackle in no time. That is the purpose of the fables. Gunter's fables have been written to inspire young people to go beyond what the parents think is possible. And whereas the parents think that the children live in a world of fantasy, it's the children who will very quickly confirm that the world in which their parents are living is a world of fantasy, and they need to come down and come to terms with reality. I wish you a great day. Bye-bye, and thank you for having me.